Howdy, I'm AlvaMan1, y'all know me. Now, for those of you who have watched my channel before, you know I'm a big fan of pro wrestling. But today I'm not going to be talking about pro wrestling. I also realize it's been a while since I've done a video, and it's actually just been too long, so let's get to it. I want to talk about some of the movies that came out in 2015. There were some good movies that came out in 2015. Let's go all the way back to January of 2015, the beginning of the year. And the first movie I'm going to talk about is Inherent Vice. I read the book before I saw the movie, and I think I had a harder time following the book than I did the movie. And I'm not going to say that necessarily they were bad, either one of them, but they weren't great. And I had a friend of mine who came and watched the movie with me, and he was as confused as I was. It's a weird story, made for a weird movie too, but weird isn't necessarily bad, like I said. Next one that I want to talk about, American Sniper, starring Bradley Cooper. This was an excellent movie, and being a veteran myself, it was kind of hard to watch, actually, because, having been in theater, having been in Iraq, you talk to a lot of guys who have, did this kind of thing where they were either on patrol going through Baghdad or what have you. Sorry about the camera moving. It's a stupid computer. I'm not using my own because I'm not at home right now, obviously. But American Sniper was a really good movie based on a true story, and that story of the guys who they get home and they have PTSD and they just have a hard time being home and not. You sort of get used to being in an area where you're always on. You're always alert. You're always thinking. You're always just waiting for something to happen, one way or the other. But again, really good movie. For anybody who hasn't seen it, I would recommend seeing it. It was really good. Oh, by the way, I'm just kind of going over the movies really that I saw. I saw quite a few movies this year, so let's talk next about one that's a little bit happier. Paddington. Pretty decent movie, but I have one complaint. They decided to change the color of Paddington's hat. Why? And a lot of people won't know this, but I have a Paddington bear, from when I was very, very little, so this would have been back at least in the 80s. And his hat used to be yellow. I guess it's just a nitpicky, silly thing, but otherwise it was a good movie. I thought it was a decent kids movie. Maybe not the best one I've ever seen, but still good. Would I recommend it? Sure, why not? It's a decent flick. I'd recommend it. Let's see, next, I have my list over here in case you're wondering what I'm looking at. Let's see. Let's move up to February. And in February, the first one I want to talk about, Jupiter Ascending. Starring Channing Tatum and Mila Kunis. She's so hot. Mila Kunis. Boy, this movie had an interesting premise, but it just felt kind of, I don't know, it felt like the story was convoluted. I mean, there were a couple of things. It felt like it could have been a unique story idea, but it also sort of felt like it was just sort of going over story ideas that have been done altogether too much already. I don't know, it wasn't bad. I did kind of enjoy it, and there were some interesting things about it too. Some of the performances I thought were pretty good, but there were parts of it that I felt like could have used a little more explanation, but there were more parts of it that I felt like it was just too much exposition, just too much. Explain a little bit, let it go. If there's something that really needs to be explained, sure, give us a little bit of that, exposition, that explanation about it. You know what I mean? But overall, not bad. Wouldn't put it at the top of my list. Uh, and also, incidentally, and not for Jupiter Ascending, but I do plan on doing some more in-depth reviews of some of these movies. This is just sort of a quick overview of movies from this year. And there were some really good movies, and we're going to get there. Um, and I didn't see the SpongeBob movie, and I'm not going to see it, so don't ask. Oh, let's see. Moving up, let's move up to March because there aren't. Oh, actually, no. You know what? Before we go into March, let's talk about one other movie, The Kingsman: Secret Service, or Kingsman: The Secret Service. Actually, uh, I actually really enjoyed this movie. It was a decent action movie, kind of a different spin on the spy movie, where you have sort of younger characters that are the spies, as opposed to your more standard spy movies like James Bond, for example, or the Jason Bourne flicks, where it's an older character, more adult character. This is more sort of your somewhere between teenager and 20-something college student type of character that I think can actually relate more to a larger number of people. James Bond, of course, is a classic, spy. He's like the spy genre. I mean, you talk about that sort of movie, James Bond is the first one that comes up. But I think that this one, and I think it lends itself to the possibility of sequels. I don't really know how well it did in the theaters, and as I said before, I am going to do some more in-depth reviews at a later date. I do plan on that. But let's take a look here. And there are many, many more movies this year. Some that I didn't see that I would like to, like Chappie, for example. I would love to see, have not seen it. The one that I still want to see and somehow haven't is the Insurgent, the Divergent series, Insurgent. I've seen the first movie and I enjoyed it. Actually, more so than I have the Hunger Games movies. And I really liked the Hunger Games books. I thought they were outstanding. And I think that the movies have done fair justice to the books, but somehow I just got more sucked into Insurgent. I'm sorry, Divergent. And I think there are books that this was based on as well. I'm fairly certain of that. That I haven't read the books, and perhaps I should. Cinderella. This one came out in March, and I was just mentioning some of these ones from March. Cinderella came out in March, and I liked this version of Cinderella. I mean, of course, Cinderella's been done before. In fact, Disney has even done it. Probably the most famous version of Cinderella. And this is a thing for Disney, and I'm going to do a whole thing on Disney, but they've done sequels to things that didn't necessarily need sequels. Like, for example, Cinderella had 2 sequels. Why? Who knows? The Little Mermaid actually had a sequel. For anybody who's actually read the original story, you know this is impossible. For one very big reason. Now, as we move along, let's go into April. Furious 7. Like, if you're a fan of the Fast and Furious movies, you'll likely enjoy Furious 7, I think. I've never been a huge fan of these movies, but they are good for what they are. And they're I kind of feel like they almost fit into sort of their own genre all by themselves. Boy, seems like in the early part of this year there were a lot of movies I didn't see. Weird, isn't it? Yeah, weird. We move into the month of May, and there was a huge one that came out in May. But, actually, 2 really big ones that came out in May for that fact. But, let's first talk about the remake of Poltergeist. I'm just going to go out here and say that I remember the first Poltergeist. I remember seeing it when I was, 10 or 11 and thinking it was scary as hell. And it was. And Poltergeist, it's one of those classic horror flicks that some of them just shouldn't be remade. Like, for example, Nightmare on Elm Street. Not a movie that ever needed to be remade. But they have remade it, and they've made sequels, and the first one was really goofy. If you've ever seen it, it is a classic kind of horror movie, but it was really, really goofy. I look back at it and laugh my ass off. I'm not scared by it in the least. But Freddy Krueger is just an iconic character. The same thing can be said for, like, Friday the 13th. Decent horror flick, but not really all that scary. And a lot of them are that way. They're very macabre and very weird, but not necessarily scary. Because if you were a younger kid, you might be scared by something. But in any case, the remake was alright. Wasn't great. And I don't think it did very well in the box office either, for that matter. But there you have it. San Andreas starring the Great One, the People's Champ, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, and Avengers, um, as far as the cinematic universes are concerned, the Marvel Cinematic Universe is already well established. The DC Universe is still kind of getting its feet going, although, obviously we've seen a number of Superman movies, we've seen a number of Batman movies. That's really all we've seen as far as DC characters. There have been a few others, some that we wish we could forget, like Steel. I'm sorry, Shaq, you're a terrible actor. Great basketball player, terrible actor. But, Marvel's also had a few that they wish they could forget, like Daredevil, Elektra. All of those I think could have been good, and I don't blame, as far as Daredevil, I don't blame Ben Affleck for that. I just blame bad writing. I think they had an idea for the character, but the people who wrote that movie, and I have to go back and look at who wrote it, because it almost felt like they didn't fully understand the character. And one guy who was actually in that movie, and I wish he had been the one who wrote it, was Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith of Jay and Silent Bob fame, who is one of my favorite directors. I think that I think he would have done a great job, and he's actually written some Daredevil comics. But moving on, we're not talking about that. That was years ago. We're talking about Avengers: Age of Ultron. It was outstanding. All of the Avengers movies have been great. I can't really say anything bad about any of the movies that have led up to the Avengers movies. And there were a couple of other Marvel movies, or at least one other Marvel movie that came out this year, and we'll get to that soon enough, believe me. We're going to move on into June, and there were a couple of big ones that came out in June. The first of which, and probably the biggest this year, Jurassic World, did really well at the box office. I can't really make any comment on this one because, sadly, here at the end of 2015, in fact today is New Year's Eve, I have not yet seen Jurassic World. I want to. I just haven't gotten there yet. And I will see it. I've seen every other Jurassic Park movie. At least one of the others I sort of wish I hadn't seen, but that's for another time. But Jurassic World did really well. It's one that I would say definitely see. Even if you haven't seen the original Jurassic Park movie, it's still kind of a cool concept. And it advances this story of the Jurassic Park island to the next level, where they've finally gotten it to where they feel like they can open it. This is just the basic idea. It stars Chris Pratt, who many will remember from Guardians of the Galaxy. He was, and pray will always be, Star-Lord for as long as they're going to have Star-Lord on the screen. Or at least until he gets too old to play the part anymore. But that's not going to be anytime soon. Let's see. One that I want to talk about here real quick that I actually haven't seen all of yet, and I need to actually watch this of it. Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl. What I saw, I actually really liked. Well, I liked. I won't say really liked, but I liked. But again, I want to see more of that. But that was another big one, and that's one that I've heard popping up around possible Oscar buzz, maybe. I don't know. I guess we'll see. The Oscar's coming up soon. But the other big one that came out in June was Pixar's, well, not their latest one, but their big movie of the year. Their movie that did really well, Inside Out. And Inside Out, it's the story of this little girl who is sort of going through the process of growing up. She's a preteen. She has to go through a huge move. And anybody, if you moved as a kid, you know how hard that can be, moving around. But the voice cast for this movie, I thought, was excellent. I thought that they did a great job casting this. Amy Poehler is the voice of Joy, and Amy Poehler is just a very funny, very beautiful woman. I've watched her on SNL pretty much the entire time she was there. She was fantastic. Phyllis Smith played Sadness. I don't know a lot about Phyllis Smith. I'll have to look up some more information on her. I've probably seen her somewhere before, but in any case, moving along. Richard Kind, and if anybody doesn't know the name, you could recognize the voice. He did the voice of one of the grasshoppers in A Bug's Life. He was also on the show Spin City with Michael J. Fox. If I remember correctly, he played one of Michael J. Fox's colleagues on that show. He's also currently on Gotham, and if I remember correctly, I believe he plays the mayor of Gotham in that show. By the way, if you haven't seen Gotham, fantastic show. But that's for another video. I'm going to do one on the TV shows that have come out in 2015, and there have been some good ones this year. But moving along, Bill Hader, another SNL alumni, and Bill Hader, I've always liked Bill Hader. I think the guy is very funny, and he was actually in another movie that came out in 2015 that I'll get to in a little bit. Mindy Kaling from the Mindy Project. She was discussed. I thought she did a great job. A girl named Caitlin Diaz was the voice of the main character, Riley. And Bobby Moynihan and Paula Poundstone. Bobby Moynihan from SNL fame, Paula Poundstone. She is a comedian, or I don't know if she's still doing it, but she at least was a comedian. They did voices. Frank Oz, who, if you don't know who Frank Oz is, let me just say, not knowing who Frank Oz is, you are. You will. You will. Sound familiar? That's because that was Frank Oz. He has done many, many voices over his career. He's an amazing voice worker. But, to say the least, this was an excellent voice cast. Oh, and I almost forgot my favorite casting of this movie, and another one that could go on that list of perfect choice for voice casting. The man who played Anger, and who I think is just perfect for that role. If you've ever listened to any of his stand-up, Lewis Black, man. If you haven't listened to him, he's very funny. He's freaking hilarious. He's one of my favorite comedians. In fact, he may be my favorite comedian right now. Although my favorite all time is always going to be Robin Williams, but I digress. But Inside Out, I highly, highly recommend this movie. It's fantastic. It's a great movie for kids. It's a fun little romp. I forgot to mention that Mr. Kind played the character Bing Bong, who was Riley's imaginary friend. But in any case, Richard Kind. Lewis Black, perfect for that. We move into the month of July. Magic Mike XXL came out. I didn't see it. I didn't see the first one either. The only reason that I would see either one of them is the Giant Killer, Big Sexy himself, Kevin Nash, who's been a wrestler that I've been watching since early to mid-90s, when he first made his debut as Diesel in the WWE. But that is, again, information for a different video. But let's see. Where was I? Oh, right. I didn't see the movie, so I can't really comment on it, but I've heard that it was pretty decent. Terminator Genisys. Oh, this is another one that I really need to see. I've watched every Terminator movie to this point, except for this one. Why? I don't know. I didn't catch this one. I will say this. Oh, I skipped one in June, and I'll go back to it in a second. Weird that I skipped that. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. I didn't see it. Moving along, Minions came out, and Minions it's good for what it is. The Minions are kind of funny little characters, and the kids like them. And, I kind of feel like after the two Despicable Me movies, it kind of felt like the natural progression was going to be that they were going to make a movie with the Minions, because the Minions kind of became the most popular characters from the movies, from those two movies. It's cool that they got their own movie, and it did okay. Trainwreck. Man, this movie is absolutely freaking hilarious. If you have not seen it, it stars Amy Schumer and Bill Hader. This movie is fantastic. See it. It's funny. Some people might find some of the humor kind of lowbrow. If you do, that's up to you. That's fine. No big thing. Let me see. Okay, I guess the next one is Pixels, starring Adam Sandler. Kevin James from Paul Blart fame and other things. And oh dear, Peter Dinklage. Peter Dinklage, who most people will know from Game of Thrones, as well as he's been in other things. He was in X-Men: Days of Future Past, and I thought he did a great job there too. But I enjoyed Pixels. Some people didn't. I'm a guy who loves, the whole retro gaming thing really appealed to me. And if that's not really your thing, I could see how people would say, it's not that great a movie. I just liked the way they did the retro games, and they made them look a little more modern, but it was still the same game. They didn't change it. I just thought it was cool looking, Another Mission Impossible movie came out. Haven't seen it, but I will, and once I do, I'll get back to you on that. There's a few other movies in here that I would love to see, like, for example, Southpaw looked really good. I want to talk about Mr. Holmes for a second. This movie starred the incomparable Sir Ian McKellen, and it was brilliant. It was the movie is about an aging Sherlock Holmes, and he just did a beautiful job with this movie. It's a very good movie. It is possible that not a lot of people have heard about this movie, but it is very good. I recommend seeing it. It was well done. But that also came out in July. But the big one that came out in July that most people talked about in July was Ant-Man, starring Paul Rudd and Martin Sheen, as it were. And I really enjoyed Ant-Man. It was funny. There was good action. They did the character justice, and Ant-Man really is kind of a lesser-known character, sort of in the same way that the Guardians of the Galaxy are, but not as much so. But they did a good job with Ant-Man. I want to jump back to June, because I missed a big one from June, and I don't know how I missed it, but hell, somehow I did. Ted 2! Starring Mark Wahlberg and, well, Ted. Boy, what can I say about Ted 2? I loved the first Ted movie. I thought this movie was hilarious, too. I think that Seth MacFarlane has a very unique type of humor, type of comedy that he puts out there. Some people don't like it. Some people like me really enjoy it. I've been a fan of Family Guy pretty much since the beginning of Family Guy, back in 1999, I think it was, right after the Super Bowl, as a matter of fact. But there's that. Moving forward again, we move into let's move into August. There was really only one or two movies that I saw in August. Strange. Well, let's start off with American Ultra. Well, for crying out loud. Starring Jesse Eisenberg. Sorry, that took me a second. A good movie, actually. I liked the way they used him as sort of like a sleeper agent. He doesn't even know he's a sleeper agent. There was a little bit of comedy, some good action. And again, this is another movie that I will go into a more in-depth review on, but for the time being, suffice it to say, I enjoyed this movie. And if you're into, the sort of, I would put this into the sort of spy genre. Certainly it's an action movie. I would say definitely give it a watch, just as, just for the comedy, just for the humor, because it's definitely worth it. Didn't see The Man from U.N.C.L.E. Heard good things though. There were a number of movies that came out in the month of August. The one that I do want to talk about the NWA, one of the most influential rap groups of the 20th, 21st century-ish. This was back when rap was good, when it was really what I consider to be real rap. Not this nonsense today with these bozos like Wiz Khalifa and Nicki Minaj, these talentless hacks that auto-tune the shit out of everything and act like what they're doing is actually good rap. No, this was back when you had the guys who were the pioneers of the rap business, making a name for themselves, bringing rap to the forefront. In case you didn't know, I am kind of a fan of rap. I like the NWA as well as others, but that's for the more in-depth review. This movie was really big, and for those who are fans of NWA, you have to see it. And if you didn't see it, what are you doing? Go out there, get it right now, see it. This movie, I think, deserves to be in there with the Oscar buzz. It was a very well done movie. Just an excellent story. And even for those who aren't a fan of rap music, the story is enough. You know, I would love to see the soundtrack for this movie because I guarantee it's an awesome movie. And actually, Dr. Dre, who was one of the members of NWA, actually put out an album called Compton earlier this year. First time I think Dre's put out an album in a while. Really, I think since Chronic 2001. But there you have it. But this is an excellent movie, and if you haven't seen it, and I know there were some people who went, oh, this is just a movie about these rappers, and all they ever talk about is bitches and hoes and drugs and guns, and yes, there have been rappers that have talked about those things, but there's more to rap than that, and I used to be one of those people who felt that way, and I really started to listen to rap, and I realized there's so much more to it than just that. But Straight Outta Compton, an excellent movie. Moving into the month of September. Well, there are a couple of movies here that I still want to see that I haven't, and honestly, I think there were two movies from September that I did actually see. The first one I want to talk about, Hotel Transylvania 2. I thought it was just as good as the first one. I really don't have a whole lot else to say about it. It made me laugh. I think it has a decent storyline to it. I really don't have a whole lot else to say about it. Moving on. Next up, Everest. And this is actually, it's interesting that it took so long for this to actually become a movie. This is based off of Jon Krakauer's book, Into Thin Air. If you've ever read the book, this is the true story of the Everest disaster, the big Everest disaster. Happened back in, I want to say, early to mid-90s, somewhere in there. And it's quite the story, honestly. It's something else, man. And it gets that adrenaline pumping, and it draws you in so much, and it is a true story, and it's exactly what the book says, and it was a good movie. I found this one had my heart pumping and had me going like right on the edge of my seat. Even though I've read the book and I knew what was going to happen beforehand, it still got me going. And I think that makes for an excellent movie. Maze Runner: The Scorch Trials. I still have not seen this, and I really want to. But the big one from September that I really want to see is Black Mass, starring Johnny Depp, about the American hitman Whitey Bulger. It looks like an excellent movie, and I think that it is actually going to be an excellent movie. I can't really say a whole lot more about it because I haven't seen it yet. But there you have it. There's that. Moving into October. Well, let's start let's see. Um, oh, Steve Jobs, a movie that a lot of people have talked about. And certainly not the first Steve Jobs movie, and probably won't be the last. Steve Jobs, he was an innovator, he was an interesting guy, but, you know, I didn't enjoy the movie as much as I thought I would. Pan I've still not seen, but I'd really like to. Goosebumps. Oh, now I grew up with Goosebumps, and back in the early to mid '90s, author R.L. Stine put out all these books under the Goosebumps name, and I can't think of one that I didn't enjoy. I really can't. One of my friends, one that you will all know, has every single Goosebumps book ever written, and that made this even more interesting. And I want to watch. I actually do want to watch it with him. And in case you're wondering, it's DOZA 101. I actually want to watch this with him. I've seen it, but I don't think I've seen the whole thing. Somebody had sent me a copy. I don't even know who exactly. It didn't seem to have an email address on it, which I thought was weird. But whatever. I watched. It seemed like it was only part of the movie because the story only got like partway through, and then I think it was only like a partial, like a clip from the movie. But what I've seen looks good, and I think Jack Black as R.L. Stine is a very interesting choice. Let's see. Boy. Jem and the Holograms. Now, I remember this cartoon kind of vaguely. It was never one of my favorites. There are some other videos on YouTube of people who are much more familiar with the franchise than I am, who said that it didn't do the franchise justice. I honestly thought that this movie seemed very rushed. It seems like to do justice to the franchise, they could have put a little bit more time into it. I felt that way to a certain extent, like with the G.I. Joe movies. And I remember being a big fan of G.I. Joe when I was little. Mid to late 80s, when G.I. Joe was huge. Transformers also, but I was never as big a Transformers fan, so, but I felt like they did okay with the G.I. Joe movies. But in any case, Jem and the Holograms, I think, was a bit of a disappointment for people. Suffragette was one that came out, in October, and it's one that I still want to see. It looks really good. It's all about the women's rights movements. I think that was an important part of American history, and being a guy who's into history, it's one that I want to see, and one that I suggest people do go and see, because you get a chance to see this. Now, moving into November, goodness me. Let's start with Trumbo, starring Bryan Cranston. I think Bryan Cranston absolutely did justice to Dalton Trumbo. That's right. Anyway, with all the movies I've seen, it's hard to bring up any specifics about it, but it was good. It was kind of one of those that sort of snuck in. It was a lesser-known movie, but still good. Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2. I am going to see this, but first, I have to watch the majority of the Hunger Games movies. I've seen the first one, and I've seen like about half of the second one, but somehow I keep falling asleep. I don't know why. Weird, right? But I will definitely give my thoughts on that once I have seen it. There's a couple that I'm sort of saving that came out in November, purposely saving. Creed. It's another Rocky movie, and I haven't actually... this one I haven't seen, but I can tell you, I do kind of want to see it because it's interesting. It's not focused on Rocky. It's actually focused on Apollo Creed's son. And for anybody who's watched the Rocky movies, as I have seen every single one, at least once, some of them many more times. But um, it's kind of interesting because they never really touch on the fact that Apollo Creed had a kid. One isn't surprised by this, of course, but I like this, and I like Michael B. Jordan in this. Oh, some people will notice that in the month of October, I skipped over the Fantastic Four. I'll talk a little bit, or was it in September? Nope, August. Okay. There we are. But we're in November here. In November, there are still two other movies that I want to talk about. I'll get back to the Fantastic Four later and explain why I skipped it. But two movies that I would definitely suggest going to see. First, let's talk about The Good Dinosaur. This is another Pixar film, and I thought that this was actually a very well done film. It didn't do very well in the theaters, and I just don't get it. Now watching this movie, I felt like there were some parts that felt a little bit rushed, like we didn't get enough development of certain characters. Not any really of the main characters, but some of the other side characters that could have used a little bit more development. I think that this movie had some issues. I'll get more into it because I'm going to do a more in-depth review of this movie, certainly. But I enjoyed it. I recommend giving it a watch. It's definitely worth it. I can't think of a single Pixar movie as yet. No, you know what? That's not true. There are a couple of Pixar movies that I didn't like, but that's neither here nor there. As for The Good Dinosaur, I definitely think it's worth seeing. The other one that I might have actually said release in December, but you know what? Hey, it came out in November, and I can understand why you wouldn't want to release it this December specifically. And we'll get to that, folks. Oh boy, will we get to that. But this movie, this is a franchise that most people are very much aware of. Everybody's heard of the Peanuts gang. Charlie Brown, Peppermint Patty, Lucy Van Pelt, Linus Van Pelt, Pigpen, Schroeder, Snoopy, Woodstock, Marcy. Come on, they're all there. Even the little red-haired girl. Yes, the little red-haired girl. She is definitely there. And I was concerned about this because this movie was a kind of a CG version of the Peanuts. It was almost somewhere between CG and 2D animation. And it's not the first movie that's really been somewhere in there, but this movie has done it the best. This movie absolutely did amazing justice to Charles Schulz's creation, and I think that Chuck Schulz himself, were he still with us, would be very proud of this movie. You kind of look at it, and you look at some of the older Peanuts movies, like Charlie Brown Christmas, that is a classic Christmas flick. And it's always been one of my favorites. One of my all-time favorites, top two. They weren't very long. They're relatively short, and it's difficult, I think, to take something that's just a comic strip that's about that long and turn it into something that's 2 hours or more. Well, but they did an excellent job with this movie. I really, really enjoyed this. Snoopy is the man. What can you say? Snoopy's the best. The Peanuts, it's absolutely fantastic. If you haven't seen it, go see it. Seriously, you really should. This movie was really done well. It did justice to the Peanuts, and anybody who says otherwise is just plain wrong. And sorry, that was a bug. Moving into the month of December, this final month of 2015, we're finally there. Woo, this one took a little bit. Okay. There are some movies that have recently just come out, but let's early in December, there's a few movies I want to talk about. I haven't yet seen, but I would like to. Macbeth. I can't believe I just said the name. That Scottish play. As a guy who's done a little bit of acting, and if you are an actor, you understand. Bugs. Why do they keep coming to them? You'll understand why it's bad to say the name. But there was a movie adaptation of that Scottish play by William Shakespeare. I mentioned it before. The M word. That's one that I would like to see, just because I'm a fan of Shakespeare, and I'm just curious to see. But it was only a limited release, so it's harder to find. Spike Lee put out a movie at the beginning of this month called Chirac. Spike Lee has done some really good stuff. I'd be interested to see this just because I like Spike Lee, excuse me, and I respect him as a director, and I think that he's done some very, very good movies, some very quality movies. Every director has one or two movies that they go, yeah, I kind of wish I hadn't done that, but again, for another movie. Another video. Oh, boy, The Big Short, which has really only been a limited release, but looks really good, and I really want to see it, has an excellent cast. There's that. But, moving on. Alvin and the Chipmunks Road Chip. I'm a big fan of Alvin and the Chipmunks. I have been since I was little. I've always liked them. My parents never liked them. They just squeaky loud noise. As I get older, I kind of understand that, but I still like the Chipmunks. Oddly enough, I didn't see the last Chipmunks movie. Not for any reason other than I just never did. I do want to see this one. It looks kind of interesting. Also, interesting note, Alvin and the Chipmunks has gotten their own animated TV show. I'll watch a couple episodes. I'll get back to you on that one. The Hateful 8, directed by the one and only Quentin Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino is one of my favorite directors. I love his movies. I haven't seen this one as yet, but it looks really good. And another one that actually came out toward the beginning of this month in December that actually premiered on Netflix that kind of goes along a very similar line, oddly enough. The Ridiculous Six, starring just a huge cast. Adam Sandler, Terry Crews, Rob Schneider, Taylor Lautner is in it. Not Owen Wilson, Luke Wilson. I keep doing that. The big guy whose name I forget. He was on Lost. He was the big heavyset fella. He's on Hawaii Five-0, I believe now. Harvey Keitel was in it. David Spade was in it. Norm Macdonald appeared in it. Nick Swardson. I forget his name, but the guy from Last Man on Earth. Another SNL alum. Bill Hader. Bill Hader? Is that right? I don't think that one's right. That one might be wrong. Vanilla Ice for some unknown friggin' reason, but it's actually a really funny movie. I enjoyed it. There were one or two things that I kind of went, ugh. It's one of those things, it's funny, but you kind of go, ugh, somebody might find offense at that. But if they do, hey, whatever. Somebody's going to be offended by everything, right? We had a remake of Point Break. If you haven't seen the original Point Break, it was actually really well done. And of course, the big one. Oh, the one that all the geeks are schwitzing over, and no, I'm not Jewish, but it seemed appropriate. They're going nuts about this one. It's done bonkers at the box office. Just from a domestic standpoint, this movie has done huge business at the box office. And by the way, it's an amazing movie. And I really want to see it with GR81. He and I see a lot of movies together. If we can drag DOZ 101 to see it, we're going to do it. And DOZ 101, by the way, I just want everybody out there on YouTube to know that DOZ 101 has not seen a single Star Wars movie. I don't know how it's possible either. But we need to get him to see all 7 Star Wars movies. I have to say this about the Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. J.J. Abrams is a godsend to the Star Wars franchise. He may have single-handedly saved it. This movie was excellent. I'm going to go into a more in-depth review, hopefully by the end of January, with any luck. But, needless to say, if you haven't seen it, get off your ass! I know a lot of theaters are sold out through the end of January, but seriously, it's Star Wars, man. This is what Star Wars should have been, not the prequels, and there were some issues there. I really think the one that had the most issues was really just the first one. Episode 2 and 3, and I'll get into that in another video, were okay. But, ladies and gents, that's what we've had for 2015. It's been an interesting year for movies in 2015. Some good, quite a few that I haven't seen, but a lot of good movies out there. I myself, for those who didn't know before this, I'm kind of a movie lover. I love going to the movies. Well, it's harder to get out than it should have been. And I go to see as many as I can every year. Now, obviously, for most of us, it's not going to be really plausible to see every movie. I wish I could. Then I could go through and just go, this one was good, that one was, this one, just, no. But there you have it. As always, I am Alvaman1. Have a good one.